Let's talk USC women basketball.
Hey y'all, what's up? It's your girl Cece and welcome to another episode of Let's Talk USC Women's Basketball. And I got my partner, Conrad, with me today. And when he's on this show, you know what it's going to be about. It's going to be analytic field ecstasy. So what's up? Yeah, that kind of word was kind of weird, but you know what I mean.
Well, I am elated to be back, on the show, between all the workout videos that the team is posting and all the videos that you've done with like Coach Burns and Jazzy and Sanaya. I mean, it's just a nice reminder that the season is quickly approaching. So I'm ready to get into it.
Yeah, and the closer it comes, I can't wait to do our first scouting report, and that's going to be against UNLV, and then the scouting report against South Carolina is going to be a lot of fun as well. So I'm looking forward to those two videos that we're going to put out, or those two podcasts. So today I thought what would be really cool is that we look at home and away stats so we can give the fans an understanding of why it makes such a difference playing home and away, and how those stats really come together to show you what your team does effectively at home, what they do effectively on the road, and what they don't do effectively on the road. So I thought it would be good if I took the team portion and you took team individual portions to see what they were good at and some challenges that they might have had, and see if we can bring those two together to figure out what they need to do on both sides of the realm coming this season. Does that make sense?
Absolutely.
So I want to start with the home. I have my notes right here. And the first thing I want to say is the main issue with USC's road problem was not shooting, right? It was losing the possession battle. And that's where they fell short as far as home versus away. First, I want to talk about the shooting metrics. For the field goal percentage, the home was 40.5%, and away, they actually shot better, 43.8%. And so that's a road change of plus 3.3%. Their three-point percentage was 27.6 at home, and again, away, they shot better, 37.4%, which was a plus 9.8% on the road. Their effective field goal percentage was 45.8 at home, and then 51.7% away, and that was a 5-point swing. So again, there wasn't a shooting issue that they had during away games. They actually shot better during away games. What are your thoughts on that before I continue breaking this down?
Well, like you said at the top of the segment, it's coming down to the possession battle. The possession battle isn't simply, again, whether or not you score or you convert a field goal. In this case, it is, are you actually getting a shot up? Are you attempting the field goal, or are you turning it over? And we kind of look into it to the players who had like the highest usage and the most touches per game. Their turnover rate at home compared to away, it's night and day, right? Or perhaps day and night, right? Because the away numbers with regards to turnover rate, they're pretty ugly. They're pretty ugly. And so I think that's kind of where we have to try to contextualize it and try to understand why that's happening. And again, the ramifications it has with regards to their overall production.
Yeah, let's talk about that a little bit, because their net rating at home was a plus 23.3. Away, they were a minus 8. That is a 31.3 swing, right? Their offensive rating was a 104.3 home, and away it was 95.6. Again, an 8.7 swing. When you look at their defensive rating, this is what you were talking about as well. At home, 81. Away, 103.5. That's a plus 22.5 for the offensive team against our defense. And that says a lot.
Yeah. And I mean, again, I kind of highlighted from the perspective of like what they do offensively, in terms of like, are you actually being able to get quality looks? But I'm glad that you mentioned the defensive rating that they're kind of conceding to opponents because I think it all comes down to communication, right?
Right.
And obviously the lack of two-way connectivity, what compared to what they show at home as opposed to when they're, in unfamiliar territory, right? Or perhaps hostile
Yeah.
territory.
Yeah.
Definitely hostile, right? Once you get to the conference portion of the
Yeah.
schedule.
Yeah.
And so, yeah, I think that lack of communication, and we talked about it, at length last season. There were periods where you could tell they were not on the same page, right? They had the right intention, but clearly, whether it was, they weren't timing things correctly, miscommunication as to where, like, the angles of which a player should cut or where the pass is coming from, setting screens incorrectly, where you're
Hmm.
basically just screening air.
Yeah.
Um,
Yeah. Yeah.
those are things that you would hope, right? That Big Lens would hope if you clean that up, that alone, forget about adding the new personnel, just cleaning those things up would lead to, again, right? More possession to possession cohesiveness.
Yeah.
Um, so, you know, looking at and to be clear, for the season, right? Last season, Jazzy Davidson, Kenny Smith, we've talked about it at length, right? Uh, the two players, right, who were two-way playmakers, right? Volume two-way playmakers, right? Amongst both assist leaders and then again forcing live ball turnovers, right? But for example, Jazzy at home, and again, she was a true freshman and she's learning as the season goes, but right, an 11.4% turnover rate, which is very solid for a player who handles the ball that much, right? 11.4% turnover rate at home, right? That
Hmm.
would put her in the 89th percentile.
Right.
On the road, it shoots up to 17.7%,
Yeah.
right?
Yeah.
62nd percentile.
Yeah.
Kennedy was again at home. She is amazing at taking care of the rock. 10.9% turnover rate. That's like up there. That's 91st percentile. That's really good ball security.
Yeah.
On the road, that shoots up to 23%,
Yeah.
right?
Yeah. What you're mentioning, I just want to piggyback off that because I'm looking at the turnovers per game right now, just for the team as a whole.
Yeah.
At home, 12.3, away, 19.1.
Yeah.
That's a plus 6.8 swing, right? Their turnover rate, what you love to talk about, 14.4% at home, and away, it's shot up to 23.2% as a team. That's major, and then when you look at
Yeah.
assist to turnover rate, even on the offensive side, like you're talking about, assist to turnover rate, at home 1.43 and away 0.83. So, you cannot score on possessions where you can't get the shot because you're turning the
Exactly.
ball over so much.
Yeah. And again, right, it's difficult to maximize their length, their athleticism, if they're constantly having to get back in transition because of again committing a live ball turnover. And so you try to look at the roster this upcoming season and try to see in what ways can they mitigate that from happening? Is it again familiarity or more familiarity, building more chemistry? I think there's something to that there. Is it the addition of the new personnel? Last season we talked about it several times where not only were certain players like say Jazzy, and Kennedy probably overextended with the amount of both playmaking and scoring that they were
Right.
responsible for. And we're just talking about the offensive end, right?
Yeah.
Um, there weren't enough secondary. I'm just going to stop there. There were not enough secondary ball handlers, right? I wanted to say tertiary, but like there's no point in going that deep, right? I think if you look at the depth of the roster here in terms of, again, players who are capable of making quick reads and accurate passes in any given possession, you would think that would help, right? Kind of, again, reduce these turnovers where they can, again, maximize all their offensive gifts.
Yeah. It's interesting because when you look at home, though, they did well. So it's
Yeah.
the away games that affected them. Um, when you talk about pace versus chaos, that's another thing that we can look at as far as the team is concerned. Their pace at home was a 69.4. Away, it was faster. It was a 71.8. Their fast break points at home were 14.8, but away, 9.6. Their opponent fast break points were 7.1 at home, so they held them to 7.1 fast break points at home, but away, they allowed 13.3 fast break points.
Yeah.
So it just seems like away, as a team, they just weren't as connected, and that could have a lot to do with the atmosphere being away, and they're used to being at Galen. But still, if you're going to win a championship, you have to be steady for both home and away games. You can't, and you can have a little difference, but these stats are big deficiencies in home versus away.
Yeah, exactly. And I think that's kind of where I think you look at the top of the roster, you see how it had like the roster has a very high ceiling, right? We know the cast of characters at this point: Juju, Sanaya, Satega, Sarah, et cetera, et cetera. Yes, Jazzy and Kennedy, but I mentioned them previously.
Yeah.
But again, right? It's a matter of, like you said, being able to again maximize them, being able to have them all on the same page. I do wonder if the addition of the new players can not necessarily, I think, again, they'll definitely add to the team's ceiling, but can the team have a higher floor than that they did last season?
Yeah.
And I think that is what ultimately would allow them to to experience more consistency from whether they're at home or on the road, and I think that's where, at least for me, I think the additions of players like a Ryan Bennett, Panya Davis, right? I think they're floor raisers. And I say that in a good thing. I'm not saying that they don't have upside, but I think they bring that more like possession to possession stability.
Yeah.
Again, we talked about in the previous episodes that we did about Ryan's ability to play both on and off ball, but we could definitely envision her having a very big role on this team because of her ability to lead any given unit. That's something the team didn't have last year. Same thing with Panya, right? Not necessarily, handling the rock, but being able to have that consistent presence inside on both ends, less scrambling, right? Allowing players to, again, have more space on the wing because, defenses have to account for her inside. We put out all together, right? Then you'd have to think that there's less opportunities for them to not be on the same page, right? Like,
Yeah, absolutely.
if anything, it's more reason for them to be communicating. You start to see that you have more clear like outlets or release valves. So yeah, it should be really interesting to see how they all come together. But I think those are I think are the reasons why Lindsay identified those players as being, not just necessarily being able to fit, but why they could really amplify what they were starting to put together last season.
Yeah, I just want to go over one more thing, or a couple more things as we continue to talk about this home and away analytics show. I'm going to call it the chain reaction. Connected outcomes, basically, right?
Yeah.
So you have USC turnovers at home, 12.3, and away, 19.1, right? We talked about that. But it creates a chain reaction.
Oh, yeah.
Opponent points off turnovers at home, 11, away, 20. Yeah, and then +9. Opponent fast break points at home, 7.1, away, 13.3. Opponent paint points, 26.5 at home, 38.9 away. I mean, so that's a 12 point, that's a plus 12.4 for the home team against our defense. Opponent free throw attempts, 13.9 at home, and they allowed 19.1 opponent free throw attempts away. So we really, not only, I mean, when you talk about possessions, that's what we're getting to, right? It was a really drop in possessions or loss in possessions during away games through their defensive struggles and through their offensive turnovers. Shooting wasn't the problem, like I said before, they just didn't have enough possessions because they kept turning it over or allowing opponents to do things that they shouldn't been allowing the opponents to do on away games.
And again, like I think all of this, well, I wouldn't say all of it, but I think a large part of where this all comes back to is it might be a buzzword, but it's true. It's connectivity, right?
Yeah,
And
yeah.
again, specifically when you talk about offensive turnovers, the lack of connective passing, because you see a lot of players last season that had really great activity and they were really consistent with their activity. Say, for example, like a Laura Williams,
Hmm.
right? Fantastic offensive rebounder. Problem is, again, right, uh, as she is still improving in being able to identify, right, when she can grab the board, when to go up with it, as opposed to, identifying who's open to kick it out to. But even then, the players still trying to learn or getting the right players who know how to relocate. Like we always talk about like how to actually maximize scramble plays, right? Which is again finding those gaps, finding the creases, and getting there. Um, didn't have enough of that last season,
Yeah,
right? Which
yeah,
either ended up in, like you said, either poor shooting on second chance opportunities or a turnover.
yeah.
Um, so yeah,
When
I
you're talking
think
about offensive rebounds too, I just want to just bring
yeah,
up this
please.
one stat. The second chance points at home were 13.4 and away were only 9.9, which is another
Yeah.
swing to the negative, right? The offensive rebound rate was a 36% at home and then 29.4% away. And even their free throws at home, 19.6, and away, they only attempted 12 free throws per game. I mean, it's just such a, when you look at this and when, like we like to do, when we really dig into the analytics, it teaches you so much about the deficiencies of, what went wrong, where it went wrong, and how it went wrong. And there is such a distinct switch in home and away with how they performed.
Right.
Other than shooting which is the whole remarkable thing about this. Other than shooting, even their bench at home 21.9. Away, their bench only was able to score 10.6 points per game. That's an 11-point swing. That's huge.
Yeah, yeah, again, right? Like when you're having to beat the team, beating the opponent is hard enough, right? Having to basically compete against your opponent and compete against yourself, that's difficult, right? That's
Yeah,
that's not a
yeah.
good recipe for winning games. But again, I think this is where obviously I know some people in our previous videos, I saw some of the comments, people saying, oh, okay, like, Juju is not the answer for everything. Well, if you watch the video, that was not our conclusion, right?
Yeah.
It's again putting all the pieces around her, or actually just the right lineups, the optimal lineups, right? To get the best out of not just Juju, but each of them, you talked about again the dip in offensive rebounding from home and away. Again, in general, Laura at home, I think she was approximately 16.5% offensive rebounding rate, right? Which is fantastic. It's like
Right.
95th percentile. On the road, still very good, but not as great, 11.9%. Okay. Um, there's absolutely nothing wrong with that. The question is, can you have more players who do that? Like, to have that level of kind of focus on that
Hmm.
end, right? Kind of doing again like the blue collar work, right? Things that probably aren't as um, I don't want to say extravagant, but not as flashy.
Yeah.
Um, so again, it's not like saying take Laura out of the rotation, but if you're adding a player like Panya, right, who again, offensive rebounding, actually she was just pretty much the same, right, whether at home or away. Um, you know, 11.2% offensive rebounding rate at home, actually 11.6% on the road. Again, it's not about necessarily replacing anyone, it's about adding, right? And adding to where, again, can you increase the floor of this team? Those are the things that I think overall, over the course of a game, but also over the course of a season, that's where, again, like they're just less susceptible to those lulls that we saw last year.
Yeah. Do you think, and I want to bring the crowd into this for away
Yes.
games. Do you think crowds really played a role in the dip in numbers? I mean, for any team, right? Does the home crowd come into play? But because when I look at this, the numbers are so variant. I could say that, yeah, the home crowd matters, but so does connectivity, and so does being focused, and so does understanding the scout.
Yeah, no, I mean, I think the team, I would assume, I have no reason to believe that the players wouldn't go into a road game with the intention of being focused and trying to be as connective as possible.
Absolutely.
But I do believe that road environments do affect the team. And, there's always like, you'll hear kind of fans, even some coaches say, right, that like, and I don't say this pejoratively, but like role players, right? There's always like that phrase or, that role players always shoot or perform better at home, right? And I've actually asked a number of college players, both men's and women's, and pros, like NBA and WNBA players, their thoughts about that. And the one thing that I've heard that I actually thought like, oh, that actually there might be something to this is they're saying that, especially, okay, if you're coming off the bench, you don't get as many touches and you don't get as many minutes to warm up. You have
Yeah.
to come in, right? So that's already hard right there, whether you're home or on the road. But on the road, a couple of like, yeah, a couple last year, a couple college players and a couple WNBA players told me that on the road, the visual and spatial differences is what messes them up. What do they mean by that, right? They're like, in your home arena, there are like visual kind of like markers that they
Yeah.
know where they should be, right? Like, oh, at the Pepsi sign, that's my sweet spot, right? I get there and I know, right? Player X is going to find me there. On the road, you don't really have that, right? I know that might sound weird, or even like they're saying like these days the jumbotron, right? Like, yeah, you always want to like keep your, your eyes down the court in transition, but no, players say they look up at the jumbotron, and so they know whether there's a defender who's like, shading them, and if there's anyone really who's going to close out. I feel like there is something to that, and especially if you are supposed to be like a bench player, but like a year like last year where key players were out,
Yeah.
and now you're thrust into an even bigger role. Like I could see how the road could really mess up your ability to kind of get into an early rhythm.
Well, you know what? You brought up something that I didn't even think about, but I would imagine even where the goal is located, right? Because in some arenas where the goal is located, the fans sit on the baseline. So the space is the space between
Yeah.
that baseline and where the fans sit or where the photographers sit could be a little bit different, to where you're used to it at home. So that could throw shooting off. You know what I mean? Any little thing could make a difference when you're going into these arenas. And so it's going to be interesting to see what happens this year, for home and away games. And then too, remember it's Big Ten play, so the travel is really hard on the West Coast teams, and I think that has something to do with it.
Yeah.
People want to say, oh, that's just an excuse, but I really think, you have jet lag. You gotta take into consideration, 1 day rest and maybe another 4-hour flight or whatever the case may be. I mean, I think that really plays into it. So it's hard to get yourself, I think, mentally focused when you're just trying to catch up on the hours that you're behind coming from the West Coast.
Yeah, no, I mean, again, I'm not saying these are excuses, right? These are just
I'm not either.
potential.
I'm
Yeah,
talking real stuff here. I think
yeah,
look, if I fly from the West Coast to the East Coast and I have like a meeting the next morning, I'm out of it. You know what I mean? It's hard for me to get myself mentally focused because I'm still thinking it's 7 o'clock at night or whatever time it is on the West Coast when it's really 10 o'clock on the East Coast. You know what I mean? It's
yeah.
hard if you haven't felt that.
And that phrase right there, if you haven't felt that. And I think this is why I kind of keep emphasizing about, okay, like yes, Jazzy, for example, she was a freshman. You give any true freshman grace. And obviously this upcoming season, this roster will include some very high profile freshmen. But the returning players, especially the upperclassmen transfers. You kind of hope, right, that their experience, again, between travel, being in, hostile crowds, again, how to acclimate to a different arena, like you said, right, that may have, yeah, just like overall different setups. You know, we know that there are going to be arenas with like weird paint on the court. I don't like those courts, but so all of those things, again, in terms of trying to help the newcomers kind of get familiarized, not just with the team, but again, how to approach these games, right? The preparation, the routine, the habits. Um, Again, that's not really analytics. That can't be quantified. But ultimately, you think if that off-court connectivity, and that's not just like leading each other, but again, right, the ability to all get on the same page, that will ultimately be reflected, in the
Yeah.
team splits.
Well, I think too on the defensive side of the ball, is on the podcast I had with Beth Burns, she talked about the difference in the defensive styles that she had to do with this particular team compared to what she's had to do with other teams, and they had to make the court smaller, is what her
Right.
verbiage was. So they weren't allowed to do, or they couldn't do things that the team before them did, which was, the mad dog press. Their identity was a whole lot different. So I think that affected the way they defended as well on these away games. I'm interested to see, with this better defensive squad that we put on the court this year, how that's going to play into these away games as far as pressing, as far as the space on the court and cutting off the guards and so on and so forth. Now remember, Ryan Bennett played for UC Davis. There wasn't travel across the country playing for UC Davis. So it's going to be interesting to see, how she adopts to the travel in the Big Ten and being able to be on the court, because like you said, she's an important piece of this puzzle, and how she's going to be able to adapt to Big Ten style of play and the travel that comes with it.
Yeah, definitely not the same level of travel that USC did. I mean, shout out to the University of Hawaii, and that 3 hour time difference. They're no longer in the Big West this upcoming season, right? They left the conference, but um, yeah,
Have a new
yeah,
coach too.
yeah, yeah. But she is definitely someone who I think, as we've talked about before in length, that the team is definitely going to be relying on. You again, I the travel for her will definitely be new,
Yeah,
but hopefully again, like just the nature of her game and how much like just baked into her DNA as a player, as like a point guard, right? Ball security has always been a big emphasis of her. You'd like to think that will travel no matter what, especially being around so many offensive weapons, right? Where the defense won't really be keying in on her at any given
yeah,
time. But in terms of defense, and what you were talking about, what Coach Burns was saying, like in terms of not having those defensive lulls, not having empty defensive possessions, right? This team is more suited. I wouldn't say necessarily like every possession, every defensive sequence is just playing straight up man, but I think assuming this roster comes in healthy, they have top to bottom, like I think in any given lineup, you could put 5 players who could each stay in front of their defensive assignment,
yeah.
right?
And you know
Uh,
what? Just not to cut you off, but I just want to make a point on top of your point.
yeah,
When the defense has to travel this year, it has to travel if they want to have success in the Big Ten. The Big Ten, to me, this year is going to be one of the toughest years, as far as teams are concerned, with Maryland and Ohio State and Iowa and even Washington defensively, right? But the defense has to travel. When you look at the opponent's 2-point percentage, they went from 38.5% at home when the opponents came and played USC at home to on their own home court. The defense didn't travel. They allowed their 51.5%
oh
opponent
shit,
2-point percentage. And then in the paint points, it went from 26.5 at home to 38.9 away.
Yeah,
The defense, the defense has to travel. That's what I'm saying. These are not like small variances. These are large variances that tells you that they really struggled and had some challenges on the road with possessions, maintaining possessions, and just the defense in general.
Yeah. And again, it could be a number of factors that go into that. I do believe communication is one of them. But defensively, again, last year, we know they didn't really have that traditional rim protector or paint protector.
Yeah.
Now, we know they did a great job in protecting the rim as a team, right? And they did it well in trapping the box, as Coach Burns was, explaining in the previous episode. But the thing is again, they were constantly trying to trap the box because they didn't have a traditional, big.
Yeah.
It'd be nice if they were doing that to be aggressive, to try to really, again, force that turnover, even if it's not a live ball turnover, force the traveling or the, 3-second violation or anything like that, try to really be aggressive late in the shot clock. That to me is the opportunity that they have, that I see them having this season. So going back to what I was saying in terms of each player being able to stay in front of their defensive assignment, I've always said, if you're going to switch for the right intentions, right? Because you want to create an advantageous defensive mismatch, Don't switch because you just don't feel confident in any one player to be able to stay in front of whoever's on ball.
Yeah.
And so if they're not switching as frequently, if they're not having to try to trap late in or early in possessions, then I think there's going to be less defensive breakdowns, right? And again, a lot of that is because of personnel. A lot of it is because of the other players coming back healthy and also having more experience under their belt. But I think that is a big thing right there, is that they don't need to be, overly aggressively doubling or blitzing early in the shot clock, so.
Yeah, it's gonna be interesting to see. I wanna segue into something else and get your thoughts on it. I don't know when this podcast is gonna go live, but a while ago on Twitter, I tweeted out and I started talking about the home court advantage and what that consists of, and you have the team and you have the fans, and then I think another key part of that is we have the DJ and DJ Malski, who's been phenomenal. I hope he does come back this season. We have the band, and then we have Tommy Trojan. But I started making a business case for exchanging Tommy Trojan for Troyana, which would be the female version of Tommy Trojan. And I think to me, it's important to me. You're laughing, but I think it's an important piece of the pie. I think it's an important piece of the pie because when you look at, women's sports nowadays and how much is growing, just for instance, I had wrote some stats down, but I think women's sports across NIL is ranked number 3 right now in college sports in NIL, ranked number 3. And I think it has grown year over year 123%, which is phenomenal, right? It's a great product. When you talk about women's basketball and what some of these, I know college is different from pros, but when you look and see what some of these women's professional teams are doing inside their arena, the marketing is huge, and it's creating. When I look at things, because I come from a sales and marketing background, I always say that, but I always look at how do we create another revenue stream, or how do we increase brand awareness, right? USC is the brand. USC women's basketball is the brand. New York Liberty, for instance, is the brand. But then you bring in somebody like Ellie.
Yeah.
Right? Who's just been amazing. And again, I'm not comparing college sports to pros. I'm just trying to make a point here. When you look at what Ellie has done, the proof of concept has been amazing, right? Sponsorship count is up 60% year over year. They even made an Ellie doll which sold out, which is crazy. But my point is USC is the product, right? But what happens in between when the product is playing is just as important because kids want to come and see other stuff. They want to be engaged, right? They want to see the game, but what happens in between the game is important. My whole challenge with Tommy, and Tommy, we don't want Tommy to leave because he's a very important piece of Trojan heritage and Trojan history.
Yeah.
But Tommy Trojan is big. You know what I mean? He's got a big head.
Yes.
He's got big feet, big legs. He can't really move on the court, and he doesn't resonate, in my opinion, like a Troyana Trojan would with little kids and little girls and little boys, and being more engaging within the basketball game. And I just want to shout out something that happened. I used to run the marketing position or marketing field position for a show called the Universe Soul Circus. I'm not sure if you're aware of it. It came out to LA years ago, but it was an African American circus that all the talent did stuff to hip hop music. General Mills was the leading sponsor of that show, and I ended up taking over that show as an independent contractor again years ago for General Mills as the marketing field supervisor. When I first went to that show, I sat down the first week, and the whole objective for General Mills during that show was they wanted to increase their sales to a specific demographic for Honey Nut Cheerios, right?
Mhm.
So automatically, I'm affiliating the Honey Nut Cheerio bee with Honey Nut Cheerios, right? And this happened years ago. So just that people aren't thinking innovatively years ago like they're doing now. I went and sat at the show for a week, and the only thing that they were doing were they would hire like five people, and they would stand outside the tents, and they would give out Honey Nut Cheerio bags, right, to kids coming out. That's not going to make a kid want to go to their mommy and say, "Mommy, I want you to go to the store and buy me some Honey Nut Cheerios." It's just not, So I made a list of 5 things that they can do, and it included, bringing in a Honey Nut Cheerio bee costumed person and having them be more engaged within the show. And I thought of 5
Mhm.
concepts that they can do. One of them was we had this talent called the King Charles Troupe, and they rode unicycles and played basketball, on in the circus.
Mhm.
And I said, before they come out, you should bring the Honey Nut Cheerio bee into the center ring, and they should have what's called a basketball shootout where they call in 2 kids, and the Honey Nut Cheerio bee is involved. And when they miss, he's, revving them up and, making faces when they lose and, just being more interactive within the show.
Yeah.
And I said, and then they had this thing called the Soul Train dance where they bring it out down couples and they would do the Soul Train
Yeah.
dance. I was like, let the Honey Nut Cheerio bee participate in the Soul Train dance and give out goodie bags, with
Mhm.
better stuff to everybody who participated. And then they had this thing called the Stomp dance where the ringmaster, his name was Casual Cow, and Zeke the Midget will walk around the circus to stomp the gospel song Stomp. I said,
Mhm.
have my staff in the Honey Nut Cheerio bee follow them and engage with the crowd. Now, I went to General Mills about it, and I went to the ownership of the circus about it, and we came together. I said, we need to be able to participate. They had these like pregame parades sometimes in some cities. Let the Honey Nut Cheerio bee walk in the parade with you guys. Let him act like he's part of the talent, right? Now, let me tell you something. It was a hit. Like all those things they implemented at the end
Mhm.
of the season, sales had went up. Brand awareness had went up for Honey Nut Cheerio bees for something as simple as just engagement, because the kids now, they wanted to see the Honey Nut Cheerio bee, and they were going home telling their mom, I want the Honey Nut Cheerio bee cereal. Not the Honey Nut Cheerios, I want the Honey Nut Cheerio bee cereal, right? So when you look at innovation and when you look at thinking outside the box and just incorporating something like that, I'm thinking revenue streams, I'm thinking brand awareness, I'm thinking engagement. How do we get these kids to say, hey, I want to come to more USC games because I want to see
Mhm.
Troyana? You know what I mean? That's my thought process.
I mean, for people who have been watching me on the show for the last couple months, they know I've been covering the Golden State Valkyries all season. right? Just the other day, the Valkyries celebrated Violet the Raven. That's the Valkyries mascot. They celebrated Violet's first birthday,
Wow.
right? And apparently Violet is old enough now that she can fly. So she flew in the arena, right? You will have no idea how much merchandise that team sold and has been selling. They've been selling out, like you said, right? In terms of like the plushies, some like magnetic violet that you put like on your shoulder, on your hat, it clips on and all kinds of stuff. But all that is to say is I like some people could like scoff at that, and that's fine if that's not for you. But it is, as you said, I think the branding and having like mascots and kind of like that in-game entertainment like that, it is targeted at a specific audience.
Hmm.
And I don't think that I've kind of come to the point where I don't think it takes away from the actual on-court product. But
No,
I
it
do
doesn't.
think it enhances the home court advantage,
Yeah.
And so now here today where we're talking about the differences of home and away, to have the raucous crowd in your favor, I'm all for that, and as you were saying, um my brother-in-law, he's a USC alum and everything like that. He used to work, for like the athletic department and everything like that. So Tommy Trojan, we've seen that. But I'm with you. Like I think I'm not saying he's outdated. I think he's more suited for like a football environment, you know. I do agree that yes, and I see a lot of WNBA mascots because they had a bunch of mascots celebrate Violet's birthday. So Ellie was, attended,
Mm.
and the one from the sky, I don't remember her name, you know.
Speaking of which, the one from the sky, just so you know, you just reminded me, they actually had the male mascot and they replaced it with Sky the lioness. And
Yes,
guess what? And so, but the whole thing with Sky the lioness, she's centered around strength and feminine power, which ties in with the Chicago Sky, right? So it's all about a brand. It's all about engagement. It's all about additional revenue streams, and I just think when you're thinking outside the box about how we can grow the brand, you just can't grow it with the product alone, right? The product alone is going to graduate and move on year after year after year, right?
right.
The mascot stays just like Tommy Trojan. Update it. You know what I mean? Do more. Be innovative. Tommy Trojan is great.
I mean, again, like they don't need to update. Tommy can like take care of football
Yeah.
and you create a new one. Troyana, is that what you said?
Troyana,
Right.
yeah.
Troyana, okay. I was thinking Tanya, but Troyana I like too, right?
Troyana, yeah.
Yeah, Troyana, it takes care of like basketball, and
Swimming, it can
yeah,
cross over to other sports. And the whole thing
gymnastics,
about, and then you can have NIL involved with Troyana. Here's the thing. Here's the kicker. There's no real large investment involved in doing this for USC. You know why? They, just like I said on Twitter, they can make this an internship. They have they have an acting school at USC.
it's true.
They have the cheerleaders. They have the song leaders. They have people that you can have try out for this position and use it, whatever, as an intern or part of the cheer squad or whatever. But the engagement is totally different because now, you have Troyana going up into the stands. You have Troyana bringing kids down and doing a dance contest and, during timeouts. You have, what I mean? There's so much you can do. You have Troyana giving away Troyana plushies, like you said, and then you can sell them. There's so much you can do at a low cost with an internship. You have the bodies there. You know how many people I think from USC would come try out for that thing? You could have Nike create the costume because you don't have to make a big bulky costume for Troyana, right? She's a female Trojan.
Yeah, I mean, you're in Southern California, right? That's where actors and actresses are born. So I
Yeah,
mean,
yeah, you're in Hollywood, and this is not to take away from Traveler, who is the real USC mascot. We're not taking away Traveler the horse, but you can't make a horse mascot for a basketball environment, and you
yeah,
can't bring Traveler into the gym. So let's be a little bit innovative and do something that's going to resonate, and this would resonate with older and younger crowds, I think, because look at what it's doing for the Valkyries. Look at what it's doing for the New York Liberty. You have old and young who come to see the Ellie halftime show, right?
Yeah, I mean, one of my colleagues at the podium finish, we kind of like jokingly call her our mascot scout because like she goes to all the different WNBA home like arenas and she gives us an eval
Yeah.
of each mascot, which by the way, in terms of innovating, Toronto, unprecedented. Toronto Tempo, they have two mascots. Two. They introduced two at once.
Yeah.
So, I mean,
Yeah.
hey, right? Again, nobody's pushing Tommy Trojan out the door. We're just like, hey, maybe you need some backup or you
Well,
know,
here's my thing.
partner.
Don't be reactive. Don't be reactive. Don't wait for another university to do this and then jump on board.
Yeah.
Be proactive, be innovative, take a chance, take a risk. Put your marketing caps on and understand how revenue streams work. Understand how you build brands, how you create brand awareness. It's not just about the team. It's about everything around the team and in between the team that matters. That's how
I
you're going to
mean,
build.
absolutely. And in this time right now, too, with the rising popularity and visibility of women's sports, but especially women's basketball, it is, it's the perfect opportunity to create and capitalize, on this new interest, right? Which is a good thing, by the way. More often than not, it is a good thing, even though there's some weird discourse out there.
Hey, like I said years ago, when it wasn't the innovative thing to do, I came up with something innovative to do with the Honey Nut Cheerio bee, and it worked. And it wasn't a bulky costume either. It was simplified so that the Honey Nut Cheerio bee could, go in the ring, do their thing. The Honey Nut Cheerio bee could dance. The Honey Nut Cheerio bee could do everything, and kids flocked to the Honey Nut Cheerio bee.
In
You
all
know,
seriousness, I want a bowl of Cheerios right now. So,
yeah, see, I'm selling the Honey Nut Cheerio brand, but I mean, you just have to be willing to take a risk and think outside the box. If you fail, but you got to be able to take a risk, because you never
yeah.
know what can happen. This could be big for USC. So, anyways, that's just I'm gonna get off my rant now, but you know, that's how I feel. That they're talking about they need to make money. That's how you make money. You build the brand.
Well, no, it's just proof right there, right? That there is that amount of enthusiasm and creativity that the team has, right there that they can really just, get a grasp of, and I don't mean that again negatively, but again, like just take advantage of the opportunity that's presented to them.
Yeah, exactly. So that's all we got. I thought it'd be great to talk about home and away stats. I think you're going to see a different away statistical formation this year, as I would call it. I don't know if that makes sense, but you know what I'm trying to say. Statistical analytical vibe on the away games this year. That's
Profile.
better. Yeah, there you go. Thank you.
Yeah.
Profile. And I'm excited to watch. But yeah, I just wanted to do this because when I started looking at it and digging into it, I thought it'd be good to go over this because it was just such a huge variance. On that note, what are you looking forward to on the away games before we get out of here?
Like I said, I mean, I'm really I this is the same answer I've been giving for multiple episodes, but it's still applicable here, right? The substitution pattern, you know, specifically to the first shift, right, with the second unit. Because again, right, like I think each lineup could have like its own distinct style, in a good way, and how they go about kind of having that connectivity that we talked about could look radically different. And I think that's really exciting. Like that, for weirdos like me, I find it to be fun and entertaining.
Yeah, I'm interested to see how the rotations are going to be as well. It's going to be fun to see. On that note, what you got going on? Hey, it's almost season, man. You're almost coming on board to do some work for USC Women's Basketball Media Lab, some real work.
That's right. That's right. Well, until then, the WNBA season we're in the home stretch, the final quarter of the regular season. So again, still you can find all my Valkyries or actually really WNBA work at thepodiumfinish.net. My next article, well, by the time this video's out, my article should already be out, but this is not about a Golden State Valkyrie. This is about Nneka Ogwumike because
Yeah, her
she definitely
retirement, huh?
deserves. Yeah, I had the opportunity to interview her before she announced her retirement. So I think it's an appropriate time to kind of write her a suitable farewell, you know.
Yeah, yeah, she did a lot for the WNBA, and I'm curious to know if she's going to remain president or how that's going to work.
So she will remain president through the remainder of this term, which would end at the end of the calendar year.
Oh,
So
wow.
yeah, so
I wonder
someone
who's going to take a,
new.
yeah, probably Fee, because Fee's a vice president, right? Nafisa Collier?
Yeah, yeah, I wouldn't be surprised if she was. I mean, I'm sure there's going to be like some kind of, I don't know,
Oh,
election vote
yeah,
process, but
yeah,
yeah, yeah, no, again, as you said, she did so much, not just for the WNBA, but women's sports in general. So
yeah. I can't see what she's going to do in her next chapter, man. I can't wait.
I'm sure it's going to be great. But yeah,
Yeah, yeah. All right. And on that note, hey, that's all I got. Make sure you guys check out the videos that I have or the podcast if you listen on any audio streams, Apple, Spotify, whatever you choose to listen to. All the podcasts are there. There are many on the YouTube channel right now, including USCJ32 Lost in the Sauce football podcast. Great guy. If you guys haven't had a chance to listen or watch that, please do, because I really think crossover collabs are important. That's another marketing thing, right? We got to get football fans to like basketball, and we got to get basketball fans to understand football. And so we need to do more collabs like that to get fan bases more engaged and involved in the community of USC. So check out that video. And then I got some more I can't speak on right now coming up in September. So get excited. And also, hey, y'all, take me serious. We need Troyana. We need Troyana Trojan. Think about it. And on that note, till the next one, fight on. Bring on Troyana. Bring on Troyana.